Hey everybody, welcome back to Watch Me. I'm your host, Emily Galindo, and we are here proving ourselves and others wrong one success story at a time. And super excited for you to be joining me because my guest today is got to be the happiest person I know. Last week we did the most positive person, and I feel like we're on a roll. And given the, political climate, given the economic climate and all of the things, who can't use a little bit more happiness in our life? And so I would love to introduce my guest, Caleb Christian, who is a certified financial planner with Granite Harbor Advisors. Anything you hear today is not considered financial advice. However, he is a happy, wealthy individual who's here to just chat with us about things. So welcome, Caleb.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.
Thank you for that intro.
Absolutely. See, and look at you. You're just beaming. I love it. Every time I'm near you, around you, I do get that infectious, happiness from you.
Well, thank you.
Is that the goal?
The goal is joy, right?
Yeah.
Because that goes beyond happiness.
Sure.
Right? Outside circumstances dictate happiness. Joy is internal all the way, regardless of the scenario. So,
I love that. I actually had a situation over the weekend with a small child, right? Like 7 years old, and choosing to be sad about something.
Right.
And whatever. And just being like, hey, buddy, did you know that you can actually choose to not be sad?
Right.
You can actually choose to be happy and joyful, right?
Yep, exactly. It's such an important thing that my wife and I, our oldest daughter, she's 9.5 years old, and her name is Rhea Joy.
Rhea Joy.
Just to be super intentional on what we're talking about right now.
Holy cow. So before we get too far into that, because I want to come back to that, I ask every guest the same question at the front end. People are just tuning in. You have 1 second to make an impact on one person. What is that message you want them to hear?
Man, yeah, that's a loaded question. There's so much there. So before I answer, let me just kind of give some backdrop here. So I've been in the business for about a decade. And I think it was the second year, I was in a meeting with a new client, and they just said kind of offhandedly, hey, I don't trust anyone who doesn't have a library. And that's always stuck with me. I've been a reader. I like to learn and grow. And a friend of mine once said, hey, if you're coasting, you're going downhill. Mm-hmm. And that's always kind of stuck with me. It's like, well, regardless of what I'm doing or who I'm with, I can always be learning and kind of sharpening the axe, if you will, with whatever topic is kind of on my heart at the time. So, developing and being intentional in your growth, and just reading and seeking, advice and wisdom and kind of defining that, because everyone's reality is a little bit different, but there are some capital T truths in this life. One thing I've taken away from this, and I say all that to say this now, my answer is whatever you read, whatever you do, whatever you grow, I always read the Bible first, and then that is the lens I see everything else, and not the other way around. Because there's so much content out there. Everyone's walk of life is different. It's beautiful, needs to be celebrated. But that has been one of the biggest things for me, and for others as well. If I had to say just one thing, regardless of where you go, what you do, what you read, whatever, if that is in alignment, it seems to kind of work well, regardless. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love your answer. It's very unique. I mean, in terms of a good, solid, out of the box piece of advice. Because I'm always another way to look at that is we say that we have access to the most amount of information humanly possible in the history of our species.
Right. And
also we are not capitalizing on that opportunity. In fact, we are getting worse.
Yep. And there's so much.
There's so much.
And it's learning to be thankful and grateful regardless, and not live in the state of comparison. Right. Yeah. And I've learned to define wisdom as knowing when to be courageous about change and growing and all that stuff, and then when to be thankful and content and not feeling like I have to go force something or figure it out or whatever, and just being faithful and prayerful and mindful and just thankful for whatever that is right here and right now, so. Yeah,
I thought about our interview today, and I have a question, and I would think that you're open to it. I see this. So I am not as strong in faith as some other people are. And in spirituality, yes, faith like that, no. Mm-hmm. I find that people that are that way seem to have this beaming ball of joy inside of them. They just are happier about life.
Yeah.
Are those two things correlated?
I believe so, 100%. Now, just to be clear, it does not mean that your life is just going to be good and gravy. Your story compared to mine are going to be different, and that's to be celebrated, like I said earlier. You know, so a mentor of mine told me a long time ago. He's talking about the faith topic and relationship with Christ, regardless of where people are on that spectrum, is that the truth of who God is a capital T truth. It's 100% objective. Like, it is, who he says he is. But how you experience that is 100% subjective. Your life is not my life, is not my brother's life, is not my father-in-law's life, and every other person, right?
Right.
And that's great. And so I think holding on to hope, faith, love, they call it the fruit of the Spirit, right? There, against these things, there is no law saying you cannot be this way, you cannot do that, right? Faith, hope, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Against these things, there is no law, right? And so just seeking that in your life and to collaborate with and call that out of other people that maybe they've never been around someone to call that goodness, gentleness, faithfulness out of is a big deal. There's so many people who, for whatever reason, they've just never had someone believe in them before. And a lot of times that's all they need. And it's not to be cheesy or corny. It's it's what I call the good stuff in life, where someone just needs to call out the truth and goodness in your life. It's there.
Right. Yeah.
Someone might be muting it or ignoring it or, whatever else, pretending it doesn't exist, or maybe they were just not around people who call out goodness in people. Maybe they're surrounded by people who attack them their entire life. I don't know, but everyone's story is different. And Romans 8:28 says that, not all things are good, but God works for the good of those who love him. And that's such a construed verse that or quote from Paul, like how you were saying earlier. Just because you're in faith and in relationship with Christ doesn't mean your life's just going to be happy-go-lucky all the time. There is some not all things are good, but all things work together for good. That's a very hard statement to kind of swallow.
Hard. Yeah.
Especially when you're right in the heart of the fire, the heat of the moment.
Right. My whole life has been crap my perspective, right?
Exactly. Of a crummy situation, it's way easier to say than live, for sure. I know that. But holding on to that and praying for it and being mindful of. I had a mentor say a long time ago, he's like, if you're always in short-term eustress, the long-term distress usually is avoidable. Now there's outside circumstances you can't control, right? But with what I can control, if I'm coasting, I'm going downhill. No. Short-term eustress, that's growing pains, being intentional, kind of preparing for when stuff hits the fan, because stuff's going to hit the fan inevitably in everyone's life in one way or another.
Right. In the program, we have the serenity prayer, right? Which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right. Amen. Yep.
Right. Because I think we get really lost in the we want to change everything, change your circumstance, and then you drive yourself mad trying to figure out how to fix it, how to change it, then not really stepping back and going, I don't think that I can do anything about this, right? And what they let go, let God, right? Like
exactly,
and just go, I don't know.
It's so funny.
It's all going to work out.
Yeah. And so I was on a leadership, whatever you want to call it, retreat kind of getaway.
Yeah.
And we literally were forced to carry a backpack full of bricks, just to emphasize the point you just said.
Yeah.
But we had to label each brick about something that if I could just snap my fingers, it would change.
How cool.
It was so impactful.
Yeah.
Right.
How many bricks did you eventually put down?
Oh man, I mean, this was over. This was a long time ago. I've grown. I'm not perfect by any means, but I've grown a lot since then. And of course, I didn't know kind of what the point of the exercise was. I'm just listening, taking orders, and doing it. So I'm writing everything down I could think of. That even halfway came to mind. Right. So it was a heavy bag.
Yeah.
But it definitely, if you can't tell, I mean, it got its point across for sure.
Have you ever heard of the landmark form?
I don't think so.
Okay, we'll talk about that later, but it's more of a personal development series, right? That kind of like a lock-in retreat type style, right? It's all weekend long.
Right.
Lot of intense stuff that you can shed all this. And one of the exercises that I think is the most impactful is this story, right? The story that you tell about your life.
Oh, right.
At the time, it was just that I was just a server and I wasn't anybody, this was years and years ago, right?
Right.
And I was coming out of my previous life and I was just this. And you have to write your whole story down, the story that you tell everybody.
Right.
And then you have to sit there and read the thing over and for I think they set the timer for 15 minutes.
Right.
And you have to continually, and then when you get to the bottom, you just start again at the top. And then eventually you don't realize it because again, you're just listening and doing the thing. Yeah. Halfway through, what do? You're like, I'm tired of freaking doing this.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, oh, really? Now you're tired? You've been saying this story for 20 years.
Right.
Now you're tired.
Right.
And so you eventually just tire yourself down. You're like, I'm never telling that story again. Never mind.
Yeah.
Like
that I could see that. I'm going to have to remember that one. I have not heard of that. So thank you for sharing. That sounds awesome.
But it really, well, I was some real freedom to go, and we're done with that, and closing
Right.
the door and moving on. Like we have to get to a blank slate.
That's great. I think the other part of that too is, another quote, Jesus said, the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And when you live in the truth, it makes space for grace. And when you have received and given grace in your life, you're a different person. Like you're free, like how you just said kind of earlier, like whatever you call it, the radiance, the joy, just the, I lead and I live in a, state of grace, right? But a lot of people don't make space for it out of, whatever you want to call it, pride, guilt, condemnation, whatever.
Right.
None of it's true. It's all lies, but it's head trash. And we all have our own stuff that we all work through mentally, for sure. But making space for grace and then living in that as your constant, changes a lot of things for sure. And
right. I think we are really good at giving others grace. And be like, oh man, you've had a really bad day. I totally get that you talk to me that but the person you need to be giving grace to is yourself. That head trash and what we say to ourselves is real bad.
And when you receive it from someone else too, now you want to give that to someone else. Yeah. Especially for things that people think, oh, there's no coming back from, or whatever, irreversible stuff. It's powerful for sure. Yeah. So
I mean, the comment, I don't think I could ever come back from this is a story that is showing up for some people in my life. And I just am like, you don't know unless you try. Right. Right. Yep. But I think that's a really sad place that people get stuck. Yeah. No hope. And then no hope. And then it becomes a spiral. They're like, well, I already did that. I might as well. Yeah. And I already did that. And I already gave up this moral. Like I might as well. And it just is a never ending spiral of despair.
Yep. And that's where I was saying earlier, someone just being a light in the darkness. And there's not a lot of people who are willing to go be that, kind of help get someone out of whatever funk they're in or just whatever and kind of fight for them. I think that's one thing, people's pride. It's like, I'm not fighting against you. I'm fighting for you. Yeah. They are not the same. They might look and feel the same because it's intense, right? Right. And it's a struggle. And that's one of my favorite words in the English language is struggle. Like I'm acknowledging an area that I want to be better at. Right. And it's not going to be easy. So I'm in the middle of fighting upstream, if you will, kind of the struggle. It's an active, conscious decision to, seek the better life, the better way of, whatever your circumstance is, you know, and it needs to be celebrated.
It does, but that struggle, because of the lens of our experience, right? It can be, like you said, viewed as an attack on me or reconfirming my story that I'm a piece of shit and blah, blah, like, right? Whatever it is that you're telling yourself. But the intention from that side is I just see it from this perspective, do what, like, and it'll feel better, and it doesn't ever translate into that way, and that can be difficult.
Well, and I feel like we talked about it in one of our networking meetings before that you and I were a part of. I can't remember where it was, but basically they were talking about, like, a lot of things in life, and of course it's not everything, but for a lot of things in life, if you make the easy decision, it's easy to do this, well, you're gonna have a hard life. Yeah. And if you make the hard decision, you'll have an easy life. That's what I was saying earlier, that eustress and distress. Of course, there's I can't remember who came up with it, but it's talking about pick your hard.
Yeah, pick your hard, man.
Like they're both hard. Choose the better one, right?
I've said this so many times lately that I'm like I can assure you the life that you're currently living and like looking in the mirror going is extremely hard. Right. This side is also hard, but not for as long and not for forever. Right. And there's a prize on the end of it.
Yep. I literally, so some of y'all may know, but kind of in my hobbies, I like to lift weights, and I just did a natural bodybuilding show, and I'm working with an older couple right now. They just want me to kind of do their nutrition plan for them and just help them out, right? And we were talking about this because it's easy to talk about from like a health and wellness stance. Like it's hard being in shape. It's also hard being unhealthy.
Right, like you can lift weights now, or you can use a walker later, pick.
And you can literally apply that for like almost every kind of arena of life. It's so true. It's just awesome.
Speaking of your library, have you ever read The Greatest Miracle in the World?
No, I'm not familiar. I don't think so, at least not off the top of my head.
Okay, Og Mandino.
Oh, I love Og, though.
He wrote The Greatest Salesman in the World.
Yep.
The second book after that was called The Greatest Miracle in the World. I need you to read this book.
I will read it.
It's like, it's only 100 pages long or whatever.
Yep.
You could read it in a night.
Right. Yeah.
and it's the sequel to The Greatest Salesman.
Okay.
I need you to read this.
For some reason, I didn't know there was a sequel, or if it's a series or whatever. But I've certainly read that book. The
Greatest Salesman.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is now knowing, because I hadn't read that, believe it or not, and then I read that Greatest Miracle, so I had to go back. But
okay,
it's
nice,
so good.
Cool.
And it's exactly about what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Yes.
I will definitely. I've got like a, we kind of at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year really get super detailed on we call it there's a background here. We call it our wealth MVP. Okay. So your MVP is your mission vision plan, and then wealth are the 5 acronyms of kind of the areas of your life that you are going to be very detailed on your mission vision plan for. Well, part of that.
What is wealth?
So it's worship, education, affluence, lifestyle, team, health. So I guess there's 6. I said 5, but
okay.
Yeah. So those are the 6 arenas of life to be very specific with your mission vision plan on.
I see. Okay.
One of my favorite quotes, I actually heard it from a Navy SEAL. We were doing a CrossFit class together, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And he said, without clearly defined goals, we become strangely loyal to acts of trivia until we become enslaved by them.
Ooh.
And I was like, ouch, and this was like, this was before the pandemic, 2020 and whatnot. So I guess it was 6, maybe 7 years ago. And the guy who penned that quote, he's actually Robert Heinlein. He's the author of Starship Troopers, which is so funny that a quote that intense, because it came out of the book, before they turned it into a movie. And of course, that's how most people know it.
Right.
But man, that quote has just rung true. Oh my gosh. And so being very intentional on your wealth MVP is a big deal. And I was saying that to say this about reading. Yeah. Every year I have, kind of, spiritual growth area, professional growth area, and then just kind of freelance, kind of 3 sections. And it's crazy just being methodical there to make sure that it's always fresh and you're always eager to read, instead of like, I just read a 300-page book that's super just philosophical, and there's like 7 commas per sentence. Yeah. And just we all know those kind of books, and they're great books, but I can't read them back to back to back. That's got to be counterbalanced with a 100-pager, very practical right now type of thing. And so being intentional has helped me a lot for sure. So I'll add that to the library.
Please. Yeah. I mean, and intentional, like listening to you just describe the wealth MVP. Yep. Like that's, for everybody listening, that's what high performers do. Like, but it takes a minute to get there. We don't start there. Like, it's making one adjustment after another to refine that practice to get to that level of intentionality. Right. Because after time and time of proof that, okay, well, I tried this one thing, right? Like right now I'm learning how to garden.
Oh, good for you.
I know, thanks. I have traditionally killed everything in my house. Like that's been the running joke. Right. Also haven't been in an environment in which I had enough to be able to give, to try to keep things alive aside from my children and pets. But
amen to that. Same here. I'm right there right now. Yeah.
Right. So now I have some more stability and emotional capacity to do that. So I was like, okay, I love pickles. I'm going to grow cucumbers. That was my goal. Yeah. And I came home from my vacation over the weekend, and there are so many freaking cucumbers.
Success.
And so my mom and I are like, oh my gosh, we should do asparagus and we should do carrots. And my dad's like, time out. Yeah. One at a time. Like, I think that's why you were so successful. We didn't try planting like all of this whole thing. I focused on one thing, got it, succeeded, and now we can add another thing.
Well, good for you though. Success is it's big. That's awesome.
So excited. Yeah. My mom bought me this cute little Dorothy basket, and I got to go out there and pick my cucumbers, and I have like a whole 15.
Nice.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I've already canned 2 jars.
Look at you. I know. Nice. That's amazing.
Because it's on my vision board.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
That I did at the beginning of this year that says gardening is having faith that tomorrow will exist.
Hey, that's beautiful.
And so I was like, done.
That's awesome.
And then, of course, the grounding of like getting your hands dirty and all of that part of it.
Right. Yeah.
So I cold plunge, put my feet in the ground, go out, check on my cucumbers and talk to them, and then get my day started.
There you go. Nice. Yeah. That's awesome.
And I've been rewarded with actual fruit. I'm excited about it. Yeah. But being intentional, that was all about being intentional. Right. And I think the book, so when you're talking about picking up the people and showing them like the light, you will understand when you finally read the book, but you are defined as a rag picker.
Huh. Okay. I'm anxious for sure. Like you definitely have my curiosity kind of peaked for
Everything that you've said this
Yeah.
morning, I'm like, I think he's read this book.
And I actually haven't.
I know, that's
Yeah.
wild.
So it's Og Mandino. So that was written in like what, the
1954, something like that.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I will be adding it to my list of, my wealth MVP, and it's a living document. Like as I'm going through the year, I'm kind of checking it, and I don't read it every day. I should probably read it more often, but I read it at least once a week, maybe twice a week.
Right.
So,
Don't shit on my friend.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
What are you reading right now?
Right now, what am I reading right now? Really good book. It's You Are Not Behind.
Okay.
Kind of what I was saying earlier on kind of wisdom of knowing when to be content and when to be courageous.
Oh, okay.
And for some reason, just here more recently, it's really popped up in my life of not being in a state of comparison. Let me just kind of hash out what I'm saying.
Sure.
I turned 37 this year. The majority of my clients are in their 50s or older.
Yep.
So I'm getting their hindsight from my foresight constantly with what I do professionally.
How incredible of an opportunity.
I'm very thankful, grateful. And the other side of the coin is kind of what I'm talking about right now. It's like they're doing all these amazing things.
Right.
And,
investments and lifestyle and all the things.
Yeah. Giving, family, impact, all this stuff. And I'm 36, turning 37 this year. Like I'm not 59 years old
Right.
yet.
Right. You still have another 20 years of.
Right. And exactly. So praying to wait well is something that I've really tried to focus in on, and not letting, and it's not I just don't want it to be a bad thing is all I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is, you're living this lifestyle. That's your story. That's amazing. It's not my story, and I need to be okay with that instead of, well, this person's doing this. I could see myself doing that so easily, but I'm not there yet.
What a beautiful, beautiful thing to be focusing on, because that
thanks.
I can imagine from your professional perspective, right? That could eat away at you.
Well, and especially when it's
every
money.
day you walk out, right? You walk out of the door and go, "Why am I not like that guy? Why don't I have it like that?" Like,
right?
You could do that.
Yeah,
and I'm sure there's a lot of people in your industry that do.
Yes, there are.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things where I just felt like this kind of creeping of that feeling way more than normal for whatever reason. I'm like, man, I really need to pray and kind of dive deep on this. And then I stumbled across this book. My wife actually knows, well, she doesn't know, but she's read a couple of her other books as well. Mm-hmm. She was like, you're reading the book by her, and I'm
Who
like,
is it?
Megan. Oh, it's the first time I read one of her books. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I'm not good. I'm not great with the fact that I even remembered Og Mandino is pretty impressive.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
no, I get it. It's all good. Megan.
Megan's something. You are not behind.
Yeah, You Are Not Behind. It's really good. Just kind of diving in on this, and kind of the paradox of contentness and courage, and being okay with that. So
yeah, I mean, I think, and that goes in line with, right, whenever we're doing this podcast, I think of myself back when I was 20 years old, the server who couldn't do any, and I think that and we're seeing more and more of that, at least on my content, my algorithm of like this, you are not behind. Like you can change your life literally at any time you want.
Yeah.
And it's never too late. My mom went back to went back to college when I was 13 years old.
Oh, wow.
Graduated from law school the same year I graduated from high school, to start like a whole new life or whatever.
Wow.
And I'm like, it's never too late to do what you want to do, dream, to live the dream.
Right.
That's
awesome.
Think. Although let's talk about this is not financial advice, but like,
sure.
It is too late for you in the financial world.
Yeah. Man, that's a loaded question.
I
for
know,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Cause everyone's so different, everyone's path. It's so funny and interesting.
So what is it that you do as a certified financial planner?
So there's a lot of ways to describe it. And of course, whenever I describe it, I have to be careful because of people's prior experiences.
Sure.
Like they might think, oh, I worked with a financial advisor and it was a person at a bank.
Yeah.
It's not a financial advisor.
Okay.
Right? Or, hey, I worked with a financial advisor and they just manage my money. That's part of it, but that's not all of it, right? Hey, I worked with a financial advisor. I'm doing air quotes on all of these for the people who can't see us right now.
Right.
And they help me with my life insurance or annuity arrangements. That's part of financial planning. It's not the only thing, right? So a lot of people will use their prior experience to define what I do.
Okay.
So
let's set the record straight.
Right. Let's set the record straight. So first and foremost, a true holistic financial planner should have a fiduciary responsibility to address anything that affects your life financially.
Across the board.
across the board.
Okay.
That is a true
Like,
certified financial planner definition. It's called the fiduciary man, or fiduciary woman if you're a
Right.
woman advisor.
but this could be buying a boat, getting divorced,
All the things. Yes.
I don't know, whatever,
Yes.
starting a new company, changing my job.
Yep. Exactly right. I
Like, hey man, should I do this? Like, that's what you want. Okay.
Yeah, I know when I had a meeting with someone, we were talking about, very, very professional individual, has a lot of really good, clients and whatnot. And we were just talking about, well, when's an ideal situation to introduce one of our clients to each other, for your service and for our service and add value. And I was just sitting there thinking through like all of the ways that I have had someone become a client because of one of the things that you just said. Mm-hmm. And there are so many circumstances that, it affects you financially. I've had a client become a client because that was the initial, whatever you want to call it, pain point or kind of reason to meet and be, hey, let's team up, let's figure something out here, be solutions oriented. So
Okay, so you deal with all the things money related in my life. And then,
Correct.
and that includes, so like you said, life insurance.
Yep. So we have
investments.
Yep. So just to keep it kind of simple, you have really three main arenas. You have your wealth management. So think of your wealth stuff like, hey, I manage your old 401k that we roll over into an IRA, just to be very simple, right? Mm-hmm. That's an easy example. Most people have some type of 401k retirement plan, something like that, okay? But the money needs to be managed because it's invested in the stock market, right? Okay. So that's wealth management, right? We're professionally managing the investment side of your finances. The flip side of the coin is risk management. So you were addressing the risks that could affect the wealth building of your financial picture.
Examples of risks:
life insurance, disability insurance, long-term care insurance, annuities.
Okay.
That's all of your insurance products, if you will, that have a place at some level for most people in their financial plan, right?
Okay.
Yep. So you have wealth management, you have risk management, and then they need to work in harmony together. There's a lot of people who are professionals who only do one or the other, but not both.
Okay.
And so, myself and our team at Granite Harbor, we're pretty well versed on all of it.
Okay.
Our numbers are pretty good across the board as a company and what we have to offer. We're independent. We don't have an affiliation with any bank or wirehouse or insurance company. We represent the client and broker the market on their behalf,
right?
To implement said solution for whatever the situation is for them. So it's very boutique because of those factors that I just said. And then the third one is just doing actual financial plan. We have a financial planning engagement. Hey, my brother manages my money and my aunt is my insurance broker. All good. But neither of them are planners, kind of like I said earlier.
Right.
Like some people have had an experience.
So what are we planning for?
Planning is like, hey, I need to start a business. All right, there's a lot of moving pieces there. We got to be intentional with, right?
Okay.
It's just any
planning for retirement, planning for to buy a second home or whatever.
Transfer of the estate is a big one, right?
Okay.
I have significant wealth. I've been very successful in my life. Praise the Lord for that. My wife and I, here's how we want to leave it, because it's either going to it's going to go to Uncle Sam, your family, or churches and charities, school, of your choosing. So being intentional there is a big deal for sure.
Right.
And then usually there's more moving pieces involved, accepting, that's why I said fiduciary responsibility for the other people at the table, literally attorneys, CPAs, lenders, appraisers, whatever, to get the job done for the client's needs. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
But that's how
I've always wanted a seat at the big table to figure out how these types of things, and you have one.
Yep. It's pretty, that's what I'm saying. I can't help but not live thankful, grateful that I get to see firsthand so many cool things for so many good people. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And also learn how to do it for yourself.
And ideally learn how to do it for myself as well. And
right. Like I feel like that's where we are at a severe disadvantage, obviously within the wealth gap within America for lots of other different reasons, but one of them being just sheer education. Yeah,
you're hitting the nail on the head. It's unfortunately, it's something that I joke about, but it's kind of unfortunate, like I said, is that, our job security, quote unquote, is pretty good because of just the lack of education on money. It's like you graduate high school and you don't even know how, old school balance a checkbook or, what's a stock and a bond and, all of these kind of basic financial things that people, someone who claims to be educated should know.
Right. Like I've got a degree. I'm very well
Right.
educated in the business world and all of the things. The
Yep.
one thing, and my parents did a great job raising me a good moral human being.
Hey, right.
They did not know anything about money. And so therefore I know nothing
Yep.
about money and
Yep.
therefore have not done a great job.
Right. Yeah.
Like, but because I think there's this stigma about money in our society, we don't tend to go to, like, we have been taught for years and years until like TikTok really, or, you know, YouTube, you don't go to wealthy people and go, how'd you make your money?
Right.
Or can you help me? Or like, that's just not, it's not socially acceptable.
Right. Yeah.
So how are we supposed to learn?
Yeah. Especially with the, you know, the older generation,
Right.
where that's like one of the, what do they call it? Like a
Taboo.
no-go topic or, or
yeah.
whatever. And everyone's different, you know.
Money, politics, religion.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
Those are the no-goes, yes.
So, you know, I think that's why I'm saying I joke that my job security is pretty good. Unfortunately, I wish it was not because of the lack of education. But at the same time, you know, my wealth MVP I was telling you about earlier.
Yeah.
At the end of each year, I write down something that I lived that year that I had never lived before, and so I call it I believe statement.
Oh.
And one of them is experience trumps research every day. Right? Like how you just said, hey, you're wealthy. Your experience trumps anything I could just search on my own and do it.
For sure.
And I like to make the kind of the analogy about like the cars. It's like I can sit here and know everything about every car, or, you know, just by researching it and reading it versus working with someone who's worked on cars their entire life firsthand. I'd much rather trust that person with my life versus someone who just knows everything about it because they could research it. They're not the same, right? So same thing with what I'm talking about too.
Absolutely. My mom as a lawyer would say your Google research does not trump my law degree.
Right.
Right. Same for a financial planner.
Yep.
Like, so what is a step that people can take to, I mean, I think that one of the other misnomers. No, I don't even know how to say that. Misnomer.
There
Thank
you go. You're good.
Is that you got to have a lot of money to talk to people like you.
Oh, sure. So it depends on who they're working with. And I meet with people all the time where, hey, look, you're a great person. The fact that you want to be intentional and responsible for this topic is fantastic. It's a win in and of itself. It probably doesn't make sense to hire us yet.
Right.
And here's why. Right. So first and foremost, like a lot of people in our industry will talk about minimums. The correct way to say this is, does it make sense for the client to hire you professionally? And it may not, right? Now, we know kind of where our market advantages are kind of level-wise just based on the client situation, but we're very forthcoming with, hey, it would make sense to hire us at this level. Here's why, A, B, C, D, whatever. Right. You know, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, it would not make sense to hire us at this level because of A, B, C, D, E. That being said, we do have clients who still hire us because having us directly involved outweighs the, you know, the potential. It's not a negative, but you know what I mean, the reason to not hire us, if that makes sense. So it literally just depends on the situation. I have meetings. But then the
rest of us are like, well, how do I get to that level without your advice and your expertise?
Yeah. And I have a DIY kind of, you know, hey, in the meantime, you know, it's not to, I don't want to talk about Dave Ramsey too much, but like, it's like the baby steps. Like I call it Dave 101. Okay. Dave Ramsey 101 is great, right? Your posture's good. You know, ideally you're out of debt. You have emergency funds to make sure you don't get back into debt. You know, things like that, right? You're saving intentionally and whatnot. So I have a DIY sheet of, hey, you know, step A, B, C, D. It's very similar, like a Dave Ramsey, Dave 101, you know. And then once you get beyond that, then it's like, okay, now we can start kind of eating food instead of drinking milk, if you will, on what we're doing, right? Yeah. So anyways. Yeah.
I love that. All right. So you, as always, bring so much joy and education and experience. If you guys want to reach out to Caleb, his contact information is in the show notes, at minimum, just to get his DIY and,
there we go.
And start on the path to building your own wealth and maybe even just get a dose of joy.
Hey.
Thank you so much
Thanks
for being
having
here.
me, Emily.
I appreciate it. All right, guys, go be joyful this week. We'll see you next time.